Okay, so hello everyone. Good morning. This is Cindy Rubin. I am the owner and founder of Keeping in Touch, which is a private, small lactation and general pediatrics home visit practice in the Chicagoland area in the western suburbs. And you are watching Keeping in Touch, which is a weekly series with all sorts of interesting topics and people who are both local as well as not local, people who are in the perinatal space, shall we say. And today I have April joining us, and April is a mom of twins who were born premature. I met her when she graciously volunteered for a photo shoot that I was doing, and I got to meet her and these amazing little boys. And I got to hear her story, and I thought it was really such an interesting story that probably many people can relate to, but yet I'm sure it's different. Everybody's story is unique. And that's the other thing that I have learned by doing this, that even in similar sorts of situations, everybody responds differently, emotionally, physically. There's so many differences. So none of us we can give advice, but with a grain of salt, knowing that everybody's story is going to be different. And sorry, where I am recording this, I have motion detector lights, and so they are going to go off and on throughout this. So if I look funny in certain lights, please excuse me. So welcome, April. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Well, I'm glad to be here.
So can you introduce yourself and just tell us what your background was professionally and family-wise going into your journey of having these twins and your lactation journey afterwards?
Oh, okay. So 47. I think that's important to say because I had these babies sort of late. They were a surprise. I actually thought I was going through menopause, but they were twins. I have one other son who's going to be 18. And these were surprise babies. I remember going to my OB-GYN who said, you should play the lottery. I'm like, why should I play the lottery? He goes, because you're pregnant and you're having twins. I said, doctor, don't joke around with me. He goes, no, twins. And then when he told me they were identical, of course, I had to do my research, right? I think sometimes like the more you know, that kind of nursing isn't my specialty. I'm actually geriatrics, but I still had to read up, and I found out all the things that can happen with an identical twin pregnancy because you're sharing the placenta. Luckily, my children were in two different sacs, but they're still sharing a placenta. Mm-hmm. So I had to be monitored very closely. A lot of people are like, oh, is it because of your age? But even if you had identical twins and you're younger, you still have to be monitored pretty closely.
Yes, for sure.
So around 16 weeks, actually, they saw that there was a size difference. And so my OB-GYN, he really wanted to deliver my twins, right? He said, I have to send you to the specialist at Northwestern.
Yeah.
You have to go. So I saw them, and they started to monitor me every 2 weeks.
And that was at what point? How far along were you?
20 weeks, every 2 weeks. And around 25 weeks, he said, okay, we have to have you come in every week, right? Every week you have to start coming in. And actually, it didn't end up being every week because I went in for one of my appointments, and then they said, we have to admit you.
So they kept just raising the level of care there. Yeah.
So I had to go in, and I was there for, 25, 26, 2 weeks. And I was inpatient. I had to stay in my room. But, I wanted to do whatever I could for the babies. Right? And I was hoping that maybe these babies would cook a little bit longer. I actually had a premature birth 18 years ago with my son. He came at 32 weeks. Now he's 6 foot tall. Right. But that sort of set the stage for my breastfeeding journey later on. So I'll go into that. It was exactly the morning that I turned 27 weeks when they said, we have to get these babies out. One of the babies is in distress. Right? Okay. So it wasn't the birth I wanted. Yeah. Wasn't the birth I planned, right? I wanted to go try to get all the ways. Most of the time, identical twins do tend to come early, but I don't want them to come at 27 weeks.
Right. Right.
But it is what it is. So I said, okay, let's get them out. And actually that morning I had actually sent my fiance back home. I said, I don't think they're coming. And then half an hour after he left, that's when the doctor said, you know what, we got to take him out now. I'm like, but my fiance,
Yeah.
we'll give your fiance half an hour. He needs to be here. I called my fiance. I'm sure he broke some traffic laws.
Yeah. Yeah.
He did get to Northwestern and he was there for the C-section. It was scary because I did not hear cries, nothing. But the staff there is so good. And they're like, oh, congratulations. And I'm like, congratulations on a 1 and 2 pound baby. But
yeah.
more like optimistic than I was. And I think maybe they have to be. You know?
Yeah. Well, I think, and I don't know if this was the situation for you. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I think a lot of the time in these situations, moms kind of guard themselves against getting too attached, right?
And the staff was very happy for me. And then they wheeled me up to my room, and a lot of it is a blur, but I remember thinking, oh, great, these babies are premature, and here I go again, right? Except they're twins. In fact, if I remember my son who was born premature, but he looked huge compared to these babies. But as soon as I was back up to my room, I said, I want to start pumping.
Okay. All right. So you were ready.
I was ready to pump. I think it might have been like 6 hours before I asked for a pump.
Okay. Had any of this been discussed before the babies came? I know usually when somebody is in the hospital with a potentially imminent premature baby delivery, usually the NICU will come and talk to you and kind of help you to prepare for what might come. And I'm wondering if you had that and whether or not that included the lactation part of things.
While I was inpatient, they did have many different people come to talk to me. And I was like, okay, I want my pump in my room ready to go.
Yeah. Good.
Yeah. I think, especially this time I'm older, like I knew exactly what I wanted. If they're going to be premature, I wanted to be prepared.
But that's an important thing, that you were able to advocate for yourself with that. And I think sometimes somebody doesn't realize how important it is to start pumping if you're separated from your baby so early on. Sometimes it does get lost, especially if mom is in any way struggling or sick.
Yeah, I mean, when I had my son 18 years ago, I don't remember anyone talking to me about breastfeeding. I don't think it was until when I got to the NICU, it was one of the nurses that talked to me about, oh, you should pump while you're at home. Right? But this time around, 18 years later, they had a lot more help.
Yeah.
So I was grateful for that. And they were very supportive.
Yeah.
Right? And in fact, I didn't want to take any pain meds either because like I don't want any of this in my breast milk. And they're like, we know what's safe. Don't be afraid to take pain meds. It might make your pumping a little bit more comfortable if you take some pain meds. I'm like, okay, because you're the doctor. I'll listen to you.
Okay. Well, good. I mean, I'm glad that they were knowledgeable about that and didn't just say, okay, do what you want. And
take something. He's like, you just had major abdominal surgery. Plus my babies were already on lots of medications anyways.
Right. That's true. A lot stronger than ibuprofen.
Yeah. But the doctor's like, look, I've been doing this a long time. Trust me. He's like, you want some. And it did make my pumping as comfortable as it could. I mean, it wasn't going to be pain-free or anything. So I started pumping really early. And I think that's really important that I did that. But I remember when I first started pumping, I think a drop or two came out. And I remember thinking, oh my gosh, how am I going to feed these babies? Just a drop or two. Right? I said, I'm going to keep going because last time I did this, eventually my milk came in because I knew it going in 18 years ago. I don't know if I would have just stopped had I not had that experience from 18 years ago. And then, 2 hours later, did it again. And a couple more drops came out. And a couple more drops came out. And then finally had like a milliliter go upstairs. My milliliter for the baby. Their tiny tummies are small. I mean, at first, anyways, when they're preemies, they couldn't get my milk anyways.
Right.
So the little I had was enough.
Right. They usually, just for people who don't know, usually when they're that little and they can't eat yet, it still can be used for mouth care.
Yeah, and that's what they did.
Yeah, that's usually the first thing. And then they fairly quickly usually start what we call trophic feeds, which are just very, very small feeds that are not so much for nourishing, but just to get the gut moving a little bit.
Yeah. So yeah, they were on TPN. So even the little bit I was able to do, right, I was able to slowly build a stash, and I must have had good insurance because it kept me in there for 5 days.
Well, good.
Yeah. And by the time I left, I had like a tray full of milk already. And so
Yeah.
that was confidence boosting for me. My insurance covered a pump, but it turns out breast didn't like that pump. So I
Okay.
ended up getting the hospital grade pump. I was able to rent it until I think I ended up trading it in 3 months for the pump that I had at home. Worked fine. But at the time, maybe it was a thing where my head was like, I don't think this is powerful enough. I need the hospital grade pump. And so I used the hospital grade pump. And I would go every day to the NICU and I would pump beside the baby. And that helped. Being in the NICU was really hard to be away from my babies. And so I took lots of pictures of the baby, videos, and I would just play the videos at home when I would pump. I would get up like as if my baby's, I think that's really important because your body has to get used to that baby schedule. I even had my fiance said, why do you have to get up all the time? The babies aren't here. I'm like, because I don't want my breast milk supply to diminish. I said, if I, sleep through the night until they come home, I'm not going to have that much milk. I said, I have to pump as if they're there.
You have to pump not only as if they're there, but as if they're full term.
Yes. Yeah. And a lot of people thought, like, as a NICU mom, I was having this big, your babies are there, someone else is taking care of them. I'm like, no, I'm getting up every 2 to 3 hours to pump.
And you're separated from them,
yes.
which is really difficult.
Yeah. I mean, seeing these babies with, vents, it was scary. I mean, I've taken care of patients with vents, but not my own children. I mean, I was afraid I would have to take one home, actually, on oxygen in a vent. So that didn't happen. But yeah, I started to get into the swing of things. When I went to the NICU, I had these, what are those pumps that you can just put in your bra?
Yeah, like the Willow or the LV.
Yeah. So I would use that while I was on the train.
Okay, good for you.
Okay. On the way to the NICU. Sometimes I also had, it's just like a breast milk collector, so it collects, so I would not waste anything on the train. When I had my fiance drive me to the NICU, I would also pump in the car, but I would use a hand pump in the car. I found those better than the knockoff Willows I bought. Those were just like for train transportation only.
Yeah. Though it sounds like you really were pumping all the time. Like if you had to pump while you were going back and forth.
Yeah, I really wanted to keep that milk production up for my twins. Yeah. When I went to the NICU, I would like hold the baby, do kangaroo care, though they were not able to eat yet, and then I would pump on one side. Those bras come in handy where you can just insert the pump. So I have some pictures of me actually, I'm holding the baby and I'm pumping, right? And the milk flowed much easier when I was actually holding the baby. There would be some times when the nurse would leave me. She goes, okay, kangaroo care, and I'd have the pump, and then I'm like, uh-oh.
Getting full?
Yeah. No one to help me because there's the over there.
I mean, so many things that go into, what makes this work. And, some combination of the hormones that are released when you're there with your baby and not stressed and worrying what's going on with my baby. You can see them and know that they're okay. I mean, there's so many things that go into it.
Yeah, it helped. Also, we had a lot of support. People in Oak Park actually brought us food, right?
Yeah.
They're like, oh, what do you need? I'm like, well, we're okay financially, but what do we need? We were eating out of the vending machine.
Yeah.
I mean, I would go there early in the morning to the NICU, and then I wouldn't come home until like it was dark. Then I would maybe grab donut or something in the vending machine. That would be my dinner. And then someone said, oh, no. These Oak Park moms like, no, we're bringing some food over here. And it was so nice to see the community come out and do that. Yeah. So that was something that was taken care of for us. People just brought food over for us. Now we can concentrate on the babies.
That's great.
We also there's an organization called Jackson Chance, and they paid for our parking.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. They paid for parking for the babies that are at Prentice, at Lurie, and there's another children's hospital that they help pay for parking. So 5 months, that's a lot of parking.
Yes. Oh, for sure. I mean, in the heart of downtown, it's very expensive.
You would think that, NICU parents would get free parking. They don't.
Well, so how did you hear about that?
Well, actually, the NICU staff told us about it. They said, oh, here's free parking passes paid for
Okay.
by the Jackson Chains organization. So
Okay.
that was really helpful, especially when you're away from your babies for so long. And that really helped, going back and forth, seeing my babies all the time. I think, like that helped alleviate my stress a little bit, seeing how
Mhm.
they were doing. And, I was able to pump. The one thing I was nervous about was breastfeeding them
Yeah.
together. And one of the nurses said, I'll teach you how to breastfeed them together. Well, I never got that lesson because
Mhm.
one baby progressed faster than the
Mhm.
other one. And I was able to practice breastfeeding. And he just took to the breast like that around 36. And at first I thought, oh my gosh, this baby's never going to breastfeed. I guess I'm just going to have to pump all the time. But
Yeah.
at 36, he went from, oh, I don't want that breast, at 36 weeks, he wanted, right?
Good for him. Yeah.
But his brother was still on a vent,
Mm.
right? And a couple times he coded. I remember you
Mm.
can't forget it. Like his face
Oh,
went
I
blue.
can only imagine.
And I
Yeah.
was thinking it was my fault because I was holding him when it
Mm.
happened. And then they said we have to transfer him to Lurie to figure out what's going on. And he was usually coding after a feed, so
Mm.
there might be something going on there. So he
Yeah.
transferred to Lurie. So I was like, oh great, I'm never going to be able to breastfeed them together.
Right. So they're both still in the NICU then, but
Mhm.
one of them is at Prentice and one is at Lurie.
Yeah. So a few days after they transferred my son to Lurie, the other one came home. Yeah. So I breastfed him, but then I would still like pump for the other one.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So I was breastfeeding one baby, and then as soon as he was done, I would stay up another 20 minutes and pump. So I was trying to save every little bit. I did have a really good stash. They actually told me to stop bringing milk. You don't have room. That's what they told me. Like, stop.
Okay.
You just keep it
That's,
at home. I'm like, okay.
yeah.
And I will keep
It's
it at home.
it's a good
Right.
problem to have.
Yeah. So I still was worried about breastfeeding my other son. Later on, they told me at Lurie that my breast milk was too
Mm.
thin and then they would have to give him formula. Right. So I was really upset about that. And I know there's a way you can thicken formula,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
I was too scared to. What if I got the proportions wrong? Right. I said, okay, fine. I said, but is there a chance maybe in the future he could get my breast milk again? They said, yeah, well, there is a chance, but as of right now, we're going to start giving him formula. And so they had to give him a formula that was thickened. So again, like my birth plan didn't happen. Now I have
Yeah.
one breastfed baby and one baby that's going to be formula fed. But
Yeah.
I still didn't quit pumping because just in case, you never know.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I still kept pumping. Eventually, I said, can I just still practice breastfeeding? And they said, yeah, but make sure you've pumped and then you can give him your nipple. Right. So I would pump first and then I would let him, dry suck, whatever they call
Mhm.
it.
So they didn't even offer fortifying the breast milk.
No, they sort
Huh.
of scared me about it. So
Okay.
I said, okay, we'll do the formula.
Yeah.
Well, eventually, guess what? He came home too after 5
Right.
months in the NICU
Right.
because he stopped coding after they gave him formula. So like, oh, it's my breast milk. Right?
Oh,
But the thing
yeah.
is, what turns out later, he just wasn't mature enough yet.
Right. I was gonna say it was just timing.
Yeah. So he
Yeah.
finally came home. I'm giving one baby formula, one baby breast milk. So I'm doing both, And I figure, you know what? Fed is best. This is what I'll do. Well, it was about 2, 3 weeks having both of them home. And the baby's crying. And I'm like, it's 2 a.m. I picked the baby up and I'm breastfeeding. I'm like, oh no, it was
It's the
my
wrong
baby.
baby.
Oh my God, he's going to die. Right. So I kept him up. I was watching him and he was fine. Right. It's like, oh,
Oh.
my breast milk didn't hurt him. So I called the pediatrician. I said, you know what? I think can you get a swallow study order for my son? I said, he's fine. Right.
Yeah.
And they had the swallow study done and he was fine. They said, you know what? He can have breast milk now.
Wow. And so he just took to the breast
Yeah, he
then.
did. But the thing is, I still had problems with doing both of them at the same
Right.
time.
Well, that's hard.
Yeah. So I did a boppy pillow and I did all sorts of finagling. And I'm going to say sometimes I cried. I thought, oh, you know what? I can't do this. I
Mhm.
can't do both of them at the same time. It's too
Mhm.
hard. I did. There were some times when I was crying.
Yeah, I'm not surprised. I mean, I don't know how you could do that without having a few moments, at the
Mhm.
very least, where that's overwhelming.
And then I had to just think like, okay, you know what? One baby's going to be crying. And I think too, it was my hormones too. It might have been a couple months after, but my hormones are still going. Now my
Yeah.
baby's pretty like, hey, you know what? Give mommy a minute.
Yeah.
But both of them are crying and I'm feeling so bad. And I'm placing one on one breast and then I'm getting the other one and the baby pops off here. He starts crying. Put the baby on here. He starts crying. Right? Like, oh, I can't. But and then I had to just give myself some patience, put the pillows around me. Sure, they might cry a little bit, but then get myself set up and then I can both get them on the breast. I had to like sort of accept that they might cry for a little bit until I got myself situated, which was the hardest thing. I'm one of those people that I don't want my babies to cry it out. I might have to cry it out for a minute. Right? Now the babies, they cry sometimes, but sometimes they don't want to share.
Yeah, right.
One
It's a
baby's
different
here,
kind of,
one baby's here, and then the other baby will pull the other hair, and then the baby will push the other one. Like, no, you have to share. I have two. There's no reason why you can't share. And most of the time, it does work out. And I love like having them both nurse, and it's comfortable. And I just feel like everything's perfect, even though things didn't start off perfect, right? And things were really tiring in the beginning. I mean, breastfeeding one, then pumping.
Yeah, I don't know how you did it. And how did you keep up your relationship with your fiance and with your other son? I know he was older and maybe
Yeah.
self-sufficient, but I imagine this put a strain on that as well.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I know that there was one time when I had just finished pumping and it spilled and I just I was crying and screaming, right? And my fiance was like, what in the world? It's just milk. I'm like, it's not just milk.
You know how much work I just put into that?
I said, my baby's going to starve. And my fiance said, the freezer's full of milk. And we can't fit food in there. Right? Like I said, hormones. So, yeah. Would I revisit those beginnings? I don't think I would. I think, especially if you're a twin mom, you need as much support as you can. Luckily, I had a lot of people help me, a lot of family. My fiance, he stuck with me, supported me. I mean, he was going through things too. A lot of times people forget, NICU dads, they also need support. We just watched a video of him reading story to the babies. And I was like, your voice is breaking in this. You have to cry in this. And I didn't notice it before. I notice it now. But yeah, NICU is really stressful. I mean, I didn't know if I was going to take them home. I know my baby Bernardo, I thought he wasn't going to make it. I mean, he coded twice. And I remember I couldn't sleep. I shook the whole time. And it was at that time when I decided I needed to get on some anxiety medication. So I talked to my doctor and, we're like, okay, you know what? This is a good med for you to get on. And, it won't affect your breast milk. Don't worry about it. And, I felt much better and I felt more in control. And the babies deserve a mommy who's more happy and more calm. And, will I still cry over breast milk that spills? Maybe I will. I'm not going to freak out much. What happened yesterday is my fiance did leave some milk out. I didn't get mad. I said, you know what? You left some milk out. Don't do it again. Because I know you were tired. Right. A lot more.
Well, I'm glad that you recognized that you needed that extra support, whether it be medication or therapy or, that you recognized that that was happening, because I worry about NICU moms at some point, have their 6-week follow-up with their OB and then they're off to the races and there isn't necessarily somebody checking on you.
Yeah, I knew because I actually had postpartum depression the first time.
Okay.
So I just let my doctor know, look, this is how I'm feeling. I'm crying all the time. I'm going to admit the first time I had my son 18 years ago. I mean, I love him to death, but I felt like a disconnect. And I was afraid I was going to feel that way with these babies. But I didn't. I loved them so much. And I was just so worried that they were going to, not be with me and they would pass. And it was more anxiety than anything this time. But in order for me to function, I had to get on med.
I mean, everyone's different, right? So for you, that's what worked. For some people, maybe stopping pumping or stopping breastfeeding is what they need. For some people, it's going to be different for everyone where they kind of draw the line and what they need to do for their own mental and physical health. because just like you said, those babies need a mommy, and
Yeah.
it's hard being a new mom no matter whether your baby's breastfeeding or not, whether your baby's in the NICU or not, and when those things are happening that are not the norm and they're just adding a million more stresses, it's difficult. And you're a nurse, you have the medical background, just having maybe not had the experience that you wanted to the first time, much more motivated now, but yet you have to take care of yourself.
Oh yeah. I mean, the first time, like I was, when I had postpartum depression, I was too embarrassed to tell anybody. Like, oh no,
Mhm.
I'm feeling this disconnect from, and it was a nurse actually in the NICU who said, you keep saying they or it about
Mm.
your baby. And she was the one who said, let's do some kangaroo care. Right.
Mm.
And she was the one who noticed it. And I'm actually shocked that I was able to like pump and have a long breastfeeding relationship with my son for so long. We did it for maybe a year and a half
Mm.
because I had a pump the whole time he was in the NICU, but I still had milk.
Yeah, your body is made for making
Oh yeah,
milk.
I probably would have been a wet nurse
Yeah.
back in the Middle Ages or something. When I think about that
Wow.
now, I'm like, oh my gosh, I never pumped. And no one told me to. So, I mean, that could have totally made my breast milk disappear. And miraculously, it didn't. I would not
Right.
suggest that to anyone.
Oh,
And
I
if
would not either. I
you
mean,
want,
probably what you did would be considered relactating because your milk probably had, for the most part, gone down, and
it
then
probably
just
did.
after starting to be stimulated again, it was able to be revved
Yeah,
back up.
I was lucky, and I was lucky that NICU nurse was
Yeah.
like, do some kangaroo care. Come in here more often because I was
Yeah.
barely coming in that first. When my son was in the NICU, I was scared. I was
Yeah.
younger. I mean, I was 28, 29, but that young to me, and I was scared to hold a tiny
Yeah.
baby with wires coming out
Yeah.
everywhere.
Yeah.
And she told me to hold him, and I don't even think she still didn't even mention pumping.
Well, she maybe just didn't wanna put another stress on
Yeah,
you.
probably. So I
Yeah.
took the baby, when I took my son home, I just started breastfeeding him. I didn't know it, and like it might not have worked, right? But it did, right? And that's when I did my own research and like, oh, I better get a pump. But there's no like the internet wasn't that great back then either. So I'm still shocked I was able to find all that information out by myself back
Yeah.
then, right? In the early ages of the internet, and that I was able to still breastfeed him. So because I had that experience back then and now I knew better, I'm like, oh my goodness, you know what? That's probably not going to be how it is now. So I
Mhm.
better pump while my twins, me, they're two in the NICU. And like my body knew, oh, you have two babies.
Right. Isn't that fascinating?
Yeah.
Like, it really is.
And it didn't care that it was 27 weeks. In the first 2-3 days, like I said, a couple drops. That third day, my milk came in like
Yeah.
I had a full term baby.
Yeah.
It came
Wow.
in a lot.
Wow.
So I'm grateful that I had many more years. And by that time, I had been a nurse a lot longer.
Okay.
Yeah. So
Yes. Yes.
back then, I was a baby nurse too, back then when I had my baby. So I still didn't
Okay.
know a lot about breastfeeding or any of that.
Well, that's part of the problem is, the people who work with moms who are breastfeeding aren't
Mhm.
trained
Yeah.
enough on breastfeeding.
No one even told me to breastfeed the baby. Kangaroo care though. That was good back
Yeah.
then. But yeah.
Yeah. Can you talk
Mhm.
more about how that was pumping for one who's in the NICU and
Mhm.
breastfeeding the other at home? Like, how was that emotionally?
Oh, it was really tiring. I
Yeah.
was fatigued. I'm gonna admit, there's sometimes I wanted to just like, oh, I'm so tired. I already have a nice stash in there, but then I was thinking he'll eventually get, better, and I have to have enough milk for both of them. I still had dreams of, one day I might like want to go to the coffee shop by myself. I have to have milk for
Right.
them. The dad can feed them. And now I don't even want to leave the house. But now they're drinking milk.
But you're still breastfeeding.
Yeah, I am still breastfeeding. But yeah, it was tiring. I was really, really fatigued, but I wanted to keep going because I wanted my son, because he was really sick,
Mm.
to get the benefits of the breast milk, even though I let them do the formula there in the NICU. I wanted him
Yeah.
to come home and eventually get my breast milk. And, I had saved a lot of that colostrum too. They both had a little respiratory thing a few months ago, and that's what it
Mhm.
gave.
That's
I think it
awesome.
helped. I forgot I had it. It was in the back, but oh my gosh, look at this is golden yellow. Guess what you kids are getting?
That's
That's what they
awesome.
had, but it was really, really tiring. But it helped that my like fiance would like do the bottles for me. So he
Mhm.
helped do the bottles and sanitize. And I would say one of the best purchases I ever got was a bottle sanitizer. Love it. Right. Chronic, just put it in there, and done. Because that saved me a lot of time. Because when I was boiling them in the pot, it was just too much.
Yeah. I mean, I remember putting some pacifiers in a pot to boil, and I came back, I don't know how much later. All of the water is gone. The
Mhm.
pacifiers are melted on the bottom of the pan, and I still have a picture of that somewhere because you're exhausted
Yeah.
too. And
Do
yeah.
whatever helps you. I even got like a bottle warmer too. I'm like, oh, I don't know. Yeah, I got a bottle warmer. Everything to make my life easy. So when he came home, I was able to give him a nice warm bottle of formula. And it helps because when I had the breast milk, I could like breastfeed one, and then my fiance would give the bottle to him. So I could, at night sometimes have a break because
No,
you think that you can. The plan is okay. I'm gonna feed them both at the same time, but
right.
that's not what they wanted to do. They were usually like waking up within an hour or two of each other. They were not on the
Yeah.
same schedule. Sometimes, not all the time. And it's sort of hard to do both of them at night. So it was really helpful to have my partner
Yeah.
bottle feed one while I
Yeah.
breastfed the other.